quality guest tonight. He is the co-host of the College Football Overdrive podcast and a contributor to War Room Sports. I met him a long time ago when I got in this draft business down in Mobile. He was down there with Scott and Shane and Pigskin Paul. He is Fred Perdue, man. Fred, thanks for coming on tonight.
Thank you guys for having me on.
So like I said, it's been a while since I saw you, man, and it was a good time. I can't remember who was the guy that was with y'all that basically made fun of Joe Everett, called him, well, look at you, you're not that impressive or something. Do you remember who that was?
Oh, the guy that was with me, Hassani Harper. That is my guy. He is a recruiting analyst down here in Florida. He covers everything high school football for H2 athletes. That's my guy, man. All day, every day.
Good stuff. That's been a running joke with me and Joe Everett ever since. Hilarious.
Oh man, those were good times. We had
it was definitely a good time. I got to get back down there.
Yeah. Look, Brian, he's got the place. He told me he has a couch, so I still have to.
Okay.
And look, we have some fear that the Senior Bowl might not last forever, so we got to get down there sooner rather than later. Well, Fred, you do the College Football Overdrive podcast over on the Debbie Marketplace channel, my other podcast, and you and I talk all the time about football and the draft. So, we get in some arguments sometimes about quarterbacks.
We do.
We do.
Yes,
so,
we do.
Look, I really respect your process. I definitely want you to kind of talk through your quarterback process and how you evaluate what you really look for in addressing the quarterback position, evaluating these college players, and then how does it kind of apply to this group?
Well, for me, I start out saying the first real question I ask is, what happens pre-snap, post-snap? When that picture changes, can that quarterback really decipher what he's seeing? If you can't tick that box off, everything else doesn't matter. Arm strength, we get enamored with it. We love it. I mean, we can name guys forever. We all love the guys that can move around. We love those guys. But can he process information quickly and efficiently? That's my number one. It's almost a end-all be-all, because nowadays everybody's an athlete. Everybody's a big guy. Everybody's they're great in underwear Olympics, but we all know what happens when that picture changes. When he sees cover two, we see two high safeties, and then safety drops off. What happened? If he can't do that, all the footwork, all the arm angles. Yeah, I'm talking to you, Zach Wilson. All of that, none of that matters.
So with that being said, who are your favorite quarterbacks in this draft class that see everything pre-snap, post-snap, the thing that you look for first? Who excels at that in this draft class, and who does not, I should say?
So I always let's get the bad out of the way. And I've heard there's a certain somebody that doesn't like this player, and I'm gonna be I don't like him either. Anthony Richardson. Everyone loves the athleticism, the size, the speed, the arm talent. But when you see, I can point to the Florida State game. We can stop there. I know that's the end of the season. We've had enough to see. We saw his freshman year. That was great. Okay, we saw, and it really wasn't. But that Florida State game told me everything I needed to know. They were running bunch. They were running gun bunch to the right side of the field. I'm not sure the receiver, but I do know that Anthony Richardson looked a flag route right in the face and literally just took off. And I'm like, oh boy. Anthony Richardson is for me, I would not touch him in the first 3 rounds. I'm very hard on quarterbacks. I'm very, very hard on quarterbacks. He is an ultimate project. He would never touch the field for me for at least 2 years. At least 2 years. Maybe give him a package here and there, sure. But beyond that, I just don't see enough on film, from the mechanics to the eye discipline to the being able to process information. I don't see it from game to game, much less week to from team to team. I just don't see what can you do to convince me. But on the other end, for the good, CJ Stroud, he's been my guy. Shane, you know this. CJ Stroud's been my guy, and you know how much I hate Ohio State. For my college football overdrive listeners, you guys know how much I love to hate Ohio State, but he has been the guy for the last 2 years. He has everything you want. I've gone as far as saying he could be Joe Burrow light. I'm that confident in a guy like CJ Stroud. He has the size, he has the accuracy, he is pinpoint accurate. One of the questions we said could he move around? Well, we saw that against Georgia. Just because they don't do it doesn't necessarily mean they can't do it. And I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with Bryce Young, right? So Bryce Young, the analogy I made. I talk a little basketball every now and then. I always said, for my basketball heads out there, right? If Kyrie Irving was about 6'5", we'd hate him because he'd be unstoppable. If Bryce Young was about 6'2", we'd hate him because he'd be virtually unstoppable. The only chink in his armor is that he maybe holds the ball a little long because he's on the shorter side and he needs to see a clear picture. But if that's the worst thing in the world, there's this guy named Drew Brees. That's a whole different level of Hall of Fame. But if he can be that type of player where you put him in an offense where he's in the gun the entire time, which Bryce Young did it at Alabama. He had a good O-line there, and it wasn't great, but it was good enough. Bryce Young could be pretty good, and he's only, 5'10". So he sees the field like a point guard. He's going to distribute the football where it needs to go. Does he have the biggest arm? No. Is he the best athlete? No. But when the chips are down, ask Texas, when the chips are down, what happened? Just saying.
It's kind of interesting because you talked about your process and that pre-snap, post-snap quick evaluation. We found out yesterday that Bryce Young had the highest score on the S2 concussion test, kind of the new and much improved Wonderlic.
Yes.
It's a lot better. When like Patrick Mahomes was the top scorer in his draft, Joe Burrow was in his draft. So it's been pretty good in a small sample size. So it's interesting. Like you said, the size is the issue, but the head might be there. Let me switch gears on you, Fred. We're going to talk about this a little bit later in the show in more detail, but I know especially for my fantasy folks out there, when you look at the NFL draft and the running back position in the NFL now, where would you take a running back? Is the position as devalued as the talk, or is this something that can still be worthwhile if you have an elite prospect like a Saquon Barkley, like a Bijan Robinson to take them high?
So I'm really staunch on running backs. So I don't care, and regardless if you've heard me on War Room Sports or any other platform, I've said this for years now. I don't care if your name is Eric Dickerson, Peyton, Peterson, whatever your name is. Doesn't matter. I don't want to touch you in that first round because of the fact that you're a depreciating asset. You're like a car. The second you've already had plenty of damage, right? You've taken a ton of carries in college. Now you're taking a ton of carries in the NFL. After about 5 years or so, you have maybe 2 years of good wear and tear left. And then we're talking about maybe an extra year. Maybe I could go find that same guy second round, third round. And then we've talked about this, Shane, you know this like I do. That position is devalued. I can go find guys, go get multiple guys to do the same thing. I don't know if you see the logo on this hat. We've been doing that for years up in Foxborough, but even having that big time back like a Derrick Henry, it sounds great, but they don't win you anything.
I don't disagree with anything you just said there. Me and Shane have this argument a lot.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of talk. I will table that because I want to get to something else.
Real quick, Jonathan Taylor was my guy, by the way. And
Yeah.
I touted him from day one at Wisconsin, and I wouldn't touch him in the first round.
I had Jonathan Taylor as my number 2 overall prospect in that class.
There you go.
And I still wouldn't have drafted him in the first round either.
There you go. And we see why now.
He's really good. Really good, but the Colts are terrible. No, I agree. I want to switch gears and let's talk a little college football here. And you're a big guy fan of the U. So I got to know, who's their best prospect this year? Is it Tyreek Stevenson? That's who I think it is. Or is it tight end Will Mallory? I don't really think anybody else is in this conversation.
I think it's Tyreek Stevenson. He has that unique blend of size and speed. He could be a very versatile player. I think you could kick him inside, honestly, if it gets that bad. But he can run with anybody. I've got a chance to see him in person, and he is and granted, he's a former Georgia Bulldog, so if he was good enough to play there, he was definitely good enough to play at Miami. Pretty good lockdown guy. I wouldn't call him the best corner. I think he could be a really good number 2. I don't see him as a number 1, but he could be a very solid number 2 corner in this league. Has all the skills that you need for that lockdown number 2 corner position.
So tell me about Mallory too, because he's interesting. You and I have talked about him for years. Like the athleticism's there, but has dealt with injuries, not been on the field. Like, can he be a starting tight end in the NFL? Does he have that kind of upside? Would you take him day 2? Round 3-ish, or is that too high for a player like Mallory?
All right, Canes fans, you're gonna hate me for this one. Sorry, he's not going round 3. More like 4 or 5. Injury history. He soft hands, decent route runner, not the greatest blocker in the world, and we don't care about that as much. But in my old school world, if you can't block as a tight end, I don't want you. It's very much like a running back. If you can't block, I don't want. Unless your name is like Kyle Pitts or something, I don't want you. So Will Mallory he's kind of the Miami tight end 1 by default. There's never really been anybody to challenge him, but at the same time, he brings a skill set that is very valuable. He does have soft hands and he runs solid routes, but he's just not the greatest athlete.
Well, he did test like a great athlete. I'll say that. Over 9 RAS from the combine this year. So testing wise, it was great. And I remember the Senior Bowl this year. He caught like the ball in 4 straight plays. It was an amazing run he had there. Last question on Miami here, and let's look ahead to a guy before this year.
I know where you're going.
We thought we're a top 10 pick. It did not quite work out that way for quarterback Tyler Van Dyke this year, and let's be honest, that was one of many contributing factors, I presume, in what got Josh Gaddis run out of there. New OC in town. Is this going to unlock TVD for next year? Or are we talking about him as a potential first rounder this time next year?
I don't think so. I think he's closer to that 2nd, 3rd round range. He's a bigger quarterback, not a great athlete, and we want the more mobile quarterbacks now. I think he's more of the point guard type, just the more stationary type. This air raid offense, I think it fits more of the smaller, more agile quarterback who can get quick reads out. Miami had a lot of issues up front on the offensive line. One guy that wasn't there for him was Zion Nelson, who if you can't protect your quarterback, it doesn't matter at all anyway, right? So those two are kind of in tandem there. If you're not able to keep him upright, it does nothing for you. I think the receivers didn't help either. I think Tyler is a better deep ball thrower than many give him credit for, but his short to intermediate stuff is where I think the work needs to be put in at. I think I could see him more of maybe a second to third round pick, and that's his ceiling. Unfortunately, with what was going on with Miami, whether it was scheme fit, recruiting, guys coming in potentially later, I think a lot of those things got muddled. And then you have Jake Garcia sitting behind him before he transferred. A lot of different factors go into him almost leaving. Tyler's a good quarterback, but I think we overrated him going into this season.
Look, I was on that bandwagon, so
I was too.
It was definitely me. We'll see what happens this year. I would still have a little bit of faith that he can bounce back. Freddie got the Patriots hat on. Let's talk some Patriots. Mac Jones trade rumors kind of swirling around. One you and I have talked about. I want you to tell the people your evaluation of Mac Jones pre-draft and now. And do you think he gets traded?
So back in his Alabama days, I thought Mac Jones was an adequate quarterback, nothing special. I never thought he was special. Post 2 years in, I think, and I compared him to a former Miami Hurricane. Shane, I'm going to go way back. Ken Dorsey. Very much Ken Dorsey had a cast of characters. Way better players around him that made him look a lot better than what he was. If you go back to Mac Jones, he had 4 first-round receivers, a first-round running back, decent O-line, good defense. Heisman Trophy winner at wide receiver. Sounds kind of like very similar to what Ken Dorsey had at Miami. But back then Ken Dorsey may have not had the size, the arm strength, but very similar in what you see on the field. He was able to distribute the football. Seeing what I've seen over the last couple years, Shane, I'd trade you for Mac Jones. You want to come? You want to come? You want to come?
You don't want to do that. I don't think.
I mean, like I could do this right now. I mean, and it's funny because I remember seeing a Facebook memory of draft night a couple years ago. Right? I said, Bill, go draft Lamar Jackson. Go. And I couldn't believe I actually said that. I'm like, as much Shane as you know how I feel about one Lamar Jackson. I actually said this, and then I'm like, Mac Jones, I could have had that over there, and Bill didn't want it, but he wanted you. And Shane, I wanted Justin Fields. That didn't happen, and he let us know why we should have drafted him. Mac Jones probably should have been a second or third round pick, but we know how quarterbacks get pushed up. Mac, please exit stage left, please. Go to Tampa. Go follow the other guy that left too. You can do that. Maybe.
Fred, the Patriots are traditionally a very tough team.
To
mock for.
I know.
So picking 14 this year, last year Cole Strange, nobody had that. They drafted Logan Mankins at one time in the first round. Nobody had that. Nate Solder, we can go on and on here. They've drafted guys that nobody else had going in the first round. So 2-part question here is, who should they be looking at pick 14, and what off the wall name are we going to be slotting in there at 14?
All right. So what should they draft? If you're going to, everything hinges on Mac Jones, because if you don't know who your quarterback is, if he's at odds with your head coach, as all reports are, and I think maybe he's not being, I think there's a little bit of tongue-in-cheek here. I think there may be a little gamesmanship being done here. But if you're let's just say we're keeping Mac Jones, right? Go get him some help, please. Kendrick Bourne wasn't the answer. Nelson Aguilar wasn't the answer. Jonnu Smith wasn't the answer. There's a guy at Ohio State named Jackson Smith and Jigba. Yeah. Go get him some help. There was once a guy that played in the slot named Julian Edelman. I call Jackson Smith and Jigba the 6'2" version of Julian Edelman. And if he plays exclusively in the slot, so be it. It works. Go get him some help around him. Go find a deep threat. But for right now, go get him some help at the wide receiver position. The off-the-wall pick. Turner at cornerback from Michigan, Mr. 428. I think Bill wants a corner, but he needs to have some speed to match up with what the Bills are doing, the Dolphins are doing. I don't necessarily agree with it, but we know I've seen Bill do some crazy things.
So what? Let's say JSN's gone at that pick 14. Maybe it's first round, maybe it's later, maybe it's day 2. What are some receivers that you think do fit what the Patriots need and want to do with that receiving group? Because it definitely needs an upgrade still.
I could see it. I like Josh Downs a lot. I like Joshua Downs a lot. I like Zay Flowers a lot. Guys that can play in space quick. I almost want to say, in the beginning, I wanted to say Tank Dell, but probably not. But those two, Zay Flowers and Joshua Downs, just because they run crisp routes. They are very much the water bug types. They are very shifty, and they can get off of. They can kind of take the top off, and especially Zay Flowers can take the top off of defense easily. You have to give Max some explosive weapons.
2 more questions, and we'll let you go, Fred. You're sitting there on day 3.
Mm-hmm.
Who are you pounding the table for? Who is your guy that hasn't gone already that you want? Maybe not necessarily the Patriots draft, but a guy you want to see have success because you love him so much as a player.
Ooh, that's a good one. I haven't had that question asked to me in a while. Oh man. I don't know if he'll last this long, but there's a QB sleeper that no one's really giving the big names. I know you guys know him, but no one's giving him any real publicity. So I'll say it. Jake Haener, quarterback, Fresno State. He is precision, he's a surgeon. Doesn't have a big arm, doesn't have the size or anything like that, but he is the prototypical I can get you down the field quarterback. Sees the picture, clear, pre and post snap, and that's the one thing I said. I need that. I don't know if he'll last that long, but I think you might have a run on quarterbacks early and then some other guys slide. But he's the guy that I think could possibly make that journey there.
I would take Jake Haener over Tanner McKee, which is a guy I see slotted up there a lot. Haener's my number 6 quarterback. I've got him the first quarterback going on day 3. So I'm with you here, but I would take him over Stetson Bennett, Jaron Hall, Max Duggan, definitely Tanner McKee, Aiden O'Connell, some of these other names I've heard bandied about. I think Haener, I like for everything you just said. Bailey, like similar to how your backup quarterback Bailey Zappi is, I think he's a very similar guy. He's not going to be a every game starter, but if he's your backup quarterback, you feel confident he can win a couple of games until your guy gets back.
Tanner McKee would have been great back in like 1995, but now in today's world where your quarterback can't be a statue. And he's got tools. Definitely has tools.
I think Shane said it today on Twitter or maybe in our Discord. I can't remember where it was, but basically Tanner McKee, like you said, no athleticism whatsoever, and had 2 NFL receivers on his team and still stunk up the joint. So
that's all I'm saying. Real quick, Fred, last question. We know about the Caleb Williams, the Marvin Harrisons, but give me a player in college. Maybe it's Miami guy, maybe not. For next year's draft or future draft that you're super high on. It's going to be a great player.
Shane, we talked about this guy probably a couple months ago now. Ole Miss running back, Judkins. Loved it. Love the production. And I don't like running back. I don't want to take a running back in the first round, but 1,400 yards as a freshman? That's hard to go over. And he has the size. He's like, 5'11", 210, 205. So you're able to take the pounding in the SEC. I love a guy that can be a high carry guy, but also be an efficient player at the same time. And again, I don't want running backs in the first round, but if you want an exciting player to watch, go watch him. Definitely.
I mean, he put Zach Evans on the pine there, a guy we're going to be talking about at some point 3 weeks from now. Maybe not day 2, but definitely day 3. Zach Evans is going to go. Fred, man, we appreciate you coming on and chopping it up with us tonight. Tell everybody where they can find all that you do.
Definitely. You guys can catch me on Twitter, Fred Perdue CFB. I'm always around talking Canes, talking Pats, talking college football. Shane, every now and then I make a jab at you and your Ohio State Buckeyes. You can also find me on the College Football Overdrive podcast with my guy, Rick Brown. We are actually going to be talking about a little bit more of we have spring games coming up. So I'm actually going to be down in South Florida covering that Miami Hurricane game. So definitely stay tuned there.
Well, when South Carolina makes the run to the SEC title next year, Fred, just remember your guy here, and I'll come on and talk about it with you.
Good luck, Spencer Rattler.
Thanks for coming on tonight.
Thanks, Fred.
Thanks, guys.
That was Fred Perdue, co-host of the College Football Overdrive podcast. Good seeing him